It is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We've been speaking for so long. It's nice to finally see you and speak to you. Hi.
Hi, you as well. I know it's so funny to put a face to the voice, that you've been listening to for so long. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad we could finally find a way to get you on the podcast. We've been trying for a while, haven't we, in various ways, but we did it.
Yay!
So tell everybody just a little bit about you and your podcast.
So my name's Kay, as we have established, and I live in California. And my husband and I have can we curse?
Oh, yeah. Go on, then.
You could bleep it out if you want.
Just this episode only. Yeah.
Yes. Our podcast is called Fuck My Work Life. And it's basically a storytelling podcast where people write in or call in and just share their kind of outrageous stories of things that happen to them and situations that happen mostly on the job. We've kind of expanded a little bit into, we call it like a podcast within a podcast, which is Fuck My Whole Life. And people just share all kinds of random stories of, like travel disasters or weird health issues and stuff like that. So it's just a place for people to come on and share their stories. And then Jay and I kind of just banter about them and stuff. Yeah. And
have a good laugh at them.
Yeah.
And there's lots of, I remember, there's lots of poo.
Yeah, that is like everyone wants to send in their poo stories, and I don't know why.
I don't know, but it's always so entertaining, isn't it?
It is. Gross, but entertaining. Like the first batch of stories we got when we first started, there were so many stories like centered around that. So one of our first episodes, it was just all poo stories.
Oh God, what are you going to get now though that you've evolved into just tell us all your stories?
Oh, no.
Oh my God.
It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, no, but it's cool. I'm glad you're doing something a wee bit different as well. It's nice to just keep changing, isn't it?
Yeah. Gotta, evolve and keep ourselves interested in doing it too.
Exactly. So did you get a lot of people from the UK? Do you have any other stories?
In the beginning, yeah, we actually had quite a few from mostly like London area. I think we did get a couple Scottish people. We had the podcast 100 Things We Learned from Film, which is someone in Northern England and then his friend who's from Scotland. And so they came on as guests and that was fun. His accent is very, very thick. But Jay was like, what?
Yeah.
What did he say? What?
Need subtitles for that episode.
Yeah. They were so much fun to have on.
It's a good podcast.
I feel like people in the UK are not as uptight as Americans, so they come on and they're just a lot more open and fun, and they love to give people shit and rip. It's just so much fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, then, so listeners, give Kate all your shit. All your shit. Yeah. All your shit stories.
All of them.
Yeah, message her now.
Yeah. We get flooded with more.
I know, because I just saw something on Instagram that you've now got that little extra button that people can just message you. Tell them about that.
Yeah, so our podcast host has this new feature where you can, like right at the top of the show description, there's a little link. So if you're listening on your phone and, you're listening along and you think of something, I want to, contribute to the conversation, you can just click the little link and you can just basically text us right from your phone as you're listening, and it goes to our inbox, which is really cool.
That is cool. It's a good idea.
Yeah. I'm sure other like podcast hosts will start picking it up. But I thought it was like really cool idea.
It is really good. I'm glad try it out. Tell me how you get on.
Yeah.
Right then. So we're going to get down to telling our story today. Yeah. Which I have to say, to begin with, Kay and I both did some research for this story. We decided we'd tell it together. And we shared notes, didn't we, not long ago? Mm-hmm. And the newspapers over here wasn't a lot. And so I sent my notes and it was very limited, very general and didn't go too deep in. And then Kay sent hers back. I was like, shall we just go with your notes then? That was everything.
But I feel like it was hard finding stuff on this case, and more so hard finding stuff about her before she was tragically murdered. And that part made me sad. So I was like, I wanted to know more more about her as a person, but it was hard to find.
It was really. And there's a podcast out called True Believer, which we'll talk about later on. And they do go a little bit deeper into talking about her. I think they speak to people that knew her in England and a little bit about that. But again, not a lot.
Yeah.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, then. Shall we go for it?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about today the murder of 50-year-old Elizabeth Mackintosh in, is it Missouri, isn't it?
Yeah, Grieve Cur, which means broken heart, sadly.
Does it?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Very apt.
I know cour is heart in French, so I guess Grieve is broken, but yeah, Missouri.
Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of a sad twist there, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah. So yeah, she was murdered there, but we're going to I'll start and tell you a little bit about her. She was born in 1940 in Scotland to James Mackintosh and Hughie, which I thought was a cool name for her mum. Hughie. Never heard of that before.
It's a cute name.
I know. So the family, they moved to Lima when Elizabeth would have been about 8, and when her father became a principal of the San Andreas College there in Lima in Peru in the late 1940s. And it was just a church that the college ran for local students. And he taught there as a theology professor as well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The family then moved back to Edinburgh in Scotland. And by this time, there is a brother, Donald, another brother, Sinclair, and a sister, Helen. So they all moved back to Edinburgh in Scotland when Elizabeth's dad, James, became a moderator of the Free Church of Scotland. James, Elizabeth's dad, originally came from Ferrintosh on the Black Isle, which is in the Highlands of Scotland, north of Inverness, which is quite high up in Scotland. And the family had a croft there, so they would spend half their year on the croft. It's remote and lovely and countryside, and the other half of the year in Edinburgh. So they had quite a diverse upbringing in the family, by the sound of it. So then Elizabeth, she studied to be a nurse. She became a nurse and worked in Edinburgh for a while. Then she moved to London. I think she was a social worker. Was it a social worker or something down there? Did you got something else?
Social worker and then a health visitor, which I had to look up, which it sounds kind of like a midwife, kind of working with families with children from like up to 5 years old. But I think she was also a social worker too at some point. I'm just not sure like when and where each of the things happened.
But then she decided to go to America. She was in America before because her sister moved there to Kansas. So I think she was about America elsewhere before she went to this seminary.
Mm-hmm. There's a true crime documentary, like one episode on this case, and you can't find the whole episode anywhere. But I was able to watch the first 8 minutes. There's a clip on YouTube. And her sister said that she had come to, I guess her sister must have been living in New York at the time. She said she came to Manhattan and met with her and said, like, I'm going to be going to this school. So I don't know if she was there visiting or if she had moved there, or it was a little unclear.
So just to tell you a little bit about Elizabeth, I found a bit in an article in the Press and Journal on the 28th of March 1990, and it was just by a family friend. And they just said that Elizabeth, she was a happy, outgoing Christian lassie, really cheerful, just really nice. She went to America and she was at the seminary in Missouri, because I can't say that, Crew. What did you say, Crew?
I think it's Creve Cool, like I don't know I can't do like the correct French spelling of cour. Just say cour. Creve cour.
Creve cour. I've been trying to look for pronunciations.
You got it. You said it.
Creve cour.
There you go.
So she went to this seminary college.
So she was getting a degree in some sort of counseling. So I think it was like some sort of religious counseling. But yeah, so I kind of furthering her social worker stuff.
And she was in her second year. It was the Covenant Theological Seminary she was at, and she was a residential student, and she was in her second year of her 3-year master's degree. Oh, in biblical counselling.
Yeah.
So while she was doing that, she was also working part-time as a cleaner at the seminary just to help her financially as she was studying. And that is where she was murdered, when she was cleaning.
Yeah. I found a couple things, and I got this, I think, off of the website for the actual true crime documentary, where people said like she was a very kind and loving woman, but she also spoke her mind a lot. And I think, I wouldn't say it made her enemies at the seminary, but a lot of the men that she interacted with weren't very appreciative of her strong personality. So I read somewhere that she like often spoke out about how the male teachers treated the female students too. So, even though she was a very kind, loving person, she's a strong woman with a lot to say. So sometimes people don't like that very much.
Yeah, I read somewhere she didn't suffer fools gladly. That was a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like you said, she was working as a cleaner at the seminary chapel, and her duties would start around 4:30 a.m. in the morning.
Which would suit you because you're a morning person. Perfect.
I mean, I wake up early. I don't want to get up and do anything that early, though. I would if I had to, but I'd rather just, lay in bed and scroll on my phone for a while. Yeah, so she would start her duties around 4:30 a.m. And on the morning of March 26th in 1990, somebody said of someone that was praying in the chapel and went to use the facilities, found her body in the men's restroom in, I believe, the basement of the chapel. And she had been hung from a stall with a VCR cord.
You see, in any of the research I did, they never, ever reported that over here. It was always just she was strangled and she had been stabbed in the neck. There was nothing. So that was new to me when I saw that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll have to look up the website. I actually saw like crime scene photos, and
you're joking.
It was brutal.
Wow.
Like there was no body. It was like the after they removed the body, but still some of the evidence was there. And the police, because she was hanging, they were like, oh, suicide. But then there was, lots and lots of blood. So they quickly ruled out that this was a suicide. So they think that she was probably strangled with the cord. When that wasn't working fast enough, she was also stabbed in the neck with, I heard a couple places they believe might have been with scissors, so someone was just taking whatever they had on hand and very ragefully murdered poor Elizabeth. So she had puncture wounds in her neck. She also had numerous bruises on her body, and they found defensive wounds on her hands. So she, strong woman that she is, she fought.
So they said that they thought that perhaps it had been somebody filled with rage and they didn't mean to perhaps kill her. But then why have you got the scissors in a man's toilet? That's not going to come to hand, is it? It's not as if it's an office. So why would you bring scissors to that if you didn't plan and think something was going to happen?
Or if you planned on, as we'll talk about the suspects later on, but if you planned on confronting them but not necessarily harming them, and then something set you off and now you're in a rage-filled state. You're just grabbing whatever's, because like a VCR cord and scissors.
Yeah, of course, where would you have got that? You brought that with you as well? And nobody heard anything.
Yeah.
There was quite a few people mulling about the chapel, because it was only a little chapel by the looks of it.
Yeah.
And there was a basement, and then that's where there was lots of rooms down there and the toilets where she'd keep her things. And then there was upstairs where you would do your praying and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was only small, so how was nobody hearing anything?
I don't know. It said that she was probably murdered between 4:50 a.m. and 6:20 a.m. So it was still pretty early in the morning. So maybe like if there was someone there, I mean, I don't know. Is there like church music going on in the chapel? Like, I don't know. I don't know how these things work.
That's a good point, actually. I read that somebody was singing down there. Maybe that drowned it out.
Or if it's like a really old building and the basement could be pretty soundproof too, I don't know. It was that few minutes I watched of the Cold Justice, everything they have was like speculation, so I don't know how much weight to give this, but they were thinking that maybe she was confronted in a separate room down there in the basement, knocked out, then strangled with the cord, and actually like dragged into the men's room and then maybe stabbed there.
Yeah.
I don't know where they got that theory. But if she was knocked out, I don't know how she would have defensive wounds on her unless there was a struggle before she was knocked out.
That's not adding up at all. If it's not premeditated, where have you got all this equipment from to hang her and stab her? And if it was, it's not adding up. Something's not adding up.
Yeah. Luckily, there was no evidence of sexual assault. So it was just purely rage and not any kind of sexual motivation. So that was the murder scene. And then they launched
they launched the
investigation.
investigation. So before that, again, I got this from the podcast, really good podcast, and where they got their information from, they must have got police notes and such like, I think. They said the chapel should have been locked, but there was about 30 people, a list of 30 people that had the keys, and it wasn't just people internally, there was outside maintenance workers that had keys to it as well, so they could be somebody outside as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there was just so many people about. There was at least 3 or 4 people in and out quite a lot, from as early as 12:15 in the morning, before she even started. They were in and out, but they were there, they were down the stairs. One of them, somebody fell asleep down there. They woke up at 4:30 and they heard something above them moving, and they thought that was Elizabeth moving about her equipment to get ready. Somebody else came down there. Somebody was singing down there. They came in to do that early in the morning, about 6:20-ish time. Somebody else was down there in the rooms in the basement to prepare for a sermon.
Oh, wow.
That person left, and they said they saw Elizabeth just at the inside. They left the back door and they walked past the main door, and they saw Elizabeth and just sort of acknowledged her, and they went on. And then they came back and they saw her coat in the hall, and the lights were on, but they went in the back entrance. There was a security guard round about the doors. There was just a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that was from 12:15, just in and out, all the way through until, her body was found, which was at, what was that now? 7 o'clock?
It's still pretty early in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7:35, her body was found in the morning on the 26th.
It was probably a very short window for someone to come in, do that, leave without being seen or heard.
Exactly. Everybody would have known that was her routine. She did the same hours.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about who some of the suspects were, or the persons of interest were?
Yeah, so the investigators questioned about 300 plus students on the college campus. They got a psychological profile from the FBI that suggested that she was a victim of a young male loner with low self-esteem. That was kind of the profile they put together for this. So the first suspect in the case was Michael, who was a fellow student and Elizabeth's work supervisor. So a couple days before their murder, they had a confrontation. I guess she wasn't happy with the cleaning supplies they were using and was arguing with Michael about it, didn't like his response, so she went over his head to their boss about it.
It was messages, wasn't it? Memos, it was backwards and forwards.
Memos. Yeah. And he was not happy about this. And so in an interoffice correspondence, which I guess is like a memo, I don't know, was there email in the 90s? I don't know, in 1990? Probably not, right?
Definitely memo.
Yeah. He chastised her for not following the chain of command. And in her response, like we said, she was a strong woman. She held her ground. And then she also corrected his spelling errors, which, ooh.
I know, pet peeve.
Yeah. So this did not make Michael happy. And he was known to have a short fuse and had even been accused of being abusive to his wife and children. And their boss had described him to the police as smart, but not necessarily emotionally stable. So he had some issues, and he and Elizabeth had this back and forth just a couple days before her murder. He was also kind of all over the place in his interrogation. In his initial statement, he said that he was in the chapel on the morning of the murder, but he told police he was there around 7:10, but then he told someone else that he actually had a meeting at 6:30 with Elizabeth.
Oh, okay.
If this suspect is the murderer, I think he didn't go there to murder her. He probably went there to confront her. Something she said set him off, and he ended up murdering her.
Which is why I think the police were saying that the murderer didn't mean to kill her. He just wanted to maybe have a fight with her, and it escalated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's also a recorded interview tape where he had claimed that he had never gone into the men's restroom where Elizabeth was killed. But then during the same interview, he also said he slipped up. He was like, I went back to the chapel. So not very clear in his story.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I think, the main and constant suspect in this case. There was also David, who was Elizabeth's pastor. And he was not a fan of Elizabeth's more liberal beliefs. I did read, when I was reading about her father, even her father was known as a little bit more liberal within the church, a little bit more open-minded. So I think she took on a little bit of that from her father, and that was not looked upon very well at this seminary. And apparently she had applied to a different seminary school in Florida. And when she talked to her pastor about it and showed him the acceptance letter the night before her murder, and his fingerprints were on the letter that was found at the crime scene. So they thought he could have been a suspect, but he had a solid alibi. You know, his wife was like, he was home. So they ruled him out.
I thought about that. I was like, why was he even a suspect just because his prints were on the letter?
Probably. And it was at the crime scene. They think it might have been in like her pants pockets and probably fell out during the struggle. So he was ruled out. And then the next suspect was Eugene. And the only reason he was a suspect was because police learned that he had an arrest record for an attempted rape with a knife back in 1987. He was acquitted of that, but after he left the seminary, he was also arrested again and convicted of armed robbery with a knife. So just because he had this past, they thought maybe he could have been a suspect. They ruled him out, but I couldn't find why.
Yeah.
And then another one, similar reason he was a suspect, was George, who was the campus librarian. He was fired after the murder when a security audit revealed that in 1971, he had been involved in the attempted sexual assault of a woman in a hospital near the seminary.
Oh my God.
So again...
And they only found that out 19 years later.
Right.
Okay. All right. How long was he employed as the librarian, did it say?
Well, he said he was fired after the murder, so after 1990.
Okay, so they just did their due diligence then.
Right. They're like, maybe we should background check these people.
Bloody hell. Okay.
He was also ruled out. Not sure why. If anyone can watch the Cold Justice or Cold whatever, I think they probably go into detail. I just couldn't find it anywhere.
No, I couldn't either.
So, I mean, basically, they had Michael as their main suspect, but the evidence was pretty weak. So they couldn't really gather enough to, and this was 90, so DNA evidence and advancements in that were not great at the time. I think they were collecting DNA, but, you know, it's not where it is now.
Yep.
There was no male DNA found on the cord or Elizabeth's shirt, but there was some DNA on her jeans, but that came back as inconclusive. So they're pretty sure Michael is the guy, but just didn't have enough evidence to actually arrest him and file charges. So the case basically just went cold.
And you would hope that, okay, it was inconclusive, that DNA at the time, but you would hope with advances that they might be able to find something. Yeah, that would lead to who did it. So yeah, it was sad. Elizabeth's mum died pretty shortly after. She never got over it, and she died pretty shortly after Elizabeth's murder. And then her dad died 6 years later.
Yeah.
Never received justice at that time.
Yeah.
So it was quite sad.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about Michael, and again, I listened a little bit from the podcast about him, and you said what he said about he's tripping himself up and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It was very strange because, yes, he admitted he was down there, and he said he went down there to see Elizabeth. He wanted to speak to her. So he's gone there deliberately to see her because he wasn't working at that time. But then he never saw her. He apparently went about all the rooms because he liked to check up on everybody, but he checked up on her. And he went about the rooms and he said, oh, well, she must have gone. But it was reported that if he actually had checked up, he would have noticed that the cleaning wasn't done. There was bins still needing emptied. It wasn't finished yet. So why would you think she was gone? Because he said that she was really good at her job and he didn't need to check as much, but he still went and checked.
Yeah.
He checked in other rooms because he came across this person, he came across the singer, and he came across that one. So why not, check the toilets? He avoided the toilets. So that was a little bit strange.
Yeah, which was probably part of her cleaning duties, right?
Well, yeah.
So you think he would check there?
Yeah, exactly. And why think it was finished when the bins weren't emptied? So again, more contradictions there.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there was one person that found the body, but there was 3 of them went and looked at the body because they thought it was suicide, and they came in and looked. They didn't go right in, but they looked to see. So 3 of them were there, and I think that was a bit ambiguous. Was it one person that found the body, or was it 3? So that's why it was just one. And then they went and told the dean, didn't they? And then the dean came as well. So there was a few people in the area.
Yeah. And I wonder too if that many people were coming and looking, if there was any sort of disturbance of any evidence that might have been there too, right? Because you're supposed to lock down the crime scene, nobody contaminate it. But if everyone's like, "Oh my God, go look what's in the men's restroom,"
I know. I think they said they weren't looking to be gruesome. It was because her body was turned away from them and they weren't sure, was it Elizabeth or was it not? So the case went cold, and it wouldn't be until
99, I think, right? Yeah.
So May 1999, it was Lieutenant George Hoddock who tried to investigate again. He'd been on the original investigation, and obviously it had been unsolved. And he said it had haunted him. It had given him a lot of sleepless hours. It was the only unsolved. It is still the only unsolved case in that
Creve Coeur.
It's the only unsolved case, so it's really annoyed them. I said the worst thing for a police officer is to have a guy running about who did this and you can't prove it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 1999. It was investigated again in 2020, and I think that's the time when it was George Hoddock again and two other investigators were retired and came back on a voluntary basis. And they were going back through every piece of evidence again that had been collected, every report. They were speaking to witnesses again, and they were just formulating new ideas. It was alluded to that even though there was so many people about, it was 300 and odd people between the staff and the students and admin staff and everything, nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything, nobody was talking. I think there was a little bit of a concern there, not that there was a cover-up or anything, but did they not feel able to talk or such like because of the seminary? So there was a wee bit of that going on.
Yeah.
But they went back over everything and they were so hopeful. They were, with the advances in DNA technology, they were hopeful that they were going to be able to bring a charge. They were sure, they were looking for search warrants and they were in the process of applying. And anyway, it wouldn't be until March 2023 when they identified a suspect who they thought it was. And they were so sure they were going to bring charges against this man. They'd prepared everything, they'd done all their questioning, reinvestigating, and they kept coming back to this memo, this interaction between this man, Michael, and Elizabeth. And they'd sent all this information to now do you call it, we call it procurator fiscal. What do you call it? The prosecutors?
Prosecutors, a district attorney sometime. Prosecutors, yeah.
Okay, so they'd sent everything they had to them, sure that they had enough. Now, it was circumstantial. It was all circumstantial because even though there was advances in the DNA, they had nothing.
Yeah.
And sadly, the prosecutors made the decision that they weren't going to go ahead with the charges. And that was devastating for the family. The brothers were still speaking and the sister was still speaking and saying, it's caused us a lot of pain, all these years not knowing. They kept getting their hopes built up every time it was reinvestigated and hoping it'd come to a conclusion, hoping they'd get there. And again, it's fallen flat. They didn't. And that's the decision being made. They believe they know who did it. And he's been confronted. So there wasn't so much, like I said at the beginning, there wasn't so much information that I could find about the case. It was very broad, very limited. You found a lot more. But then 2023, even more has come out that I don't know whether you knew about this lie detector test. Did you know about that?
I read it in your notes. I didn't see anything about that when I was looking for stuff on this.
No, and it was big headlines. It was like, prime murder suspect tried to cheat the lie detector test because he was using breathing techniques and he was told to stop using them.
Stop breathing.
Stop breathing like that. You're doing it wrong. And he was told to stop doing that and he carried on doing it. And the guy said, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, I think you're deliberately trying. It's like, it's just me. I'm just breathing. I'm sorry, I don't know what. So I don't know. I don't put much weight behind lie detector tests anyway. Do you?
No. I think they've pretty much said that. I don't even think they're allowed as evidence in courts of law in the United States anymore.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Like they can do them, but I don't know if it's like considered hard evidence. Because I feel like anyone could fail a lie detector test if you're nervous.
Exactly. It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're breathing the wrong way, God, you'd be breathing a bit heavier than normal, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think Michael, he wanted to, he asked to do the lie detector test because he's spent his whole life living under this cloud of, we think it's you, we're sure it's you, but we can't prove it. So he went, that was his way, and then it didn't work out. So that was the latest thing.
They did actually confront him too, where he's now like living in a different state and they confronted him in the parking lot of his job. And even then, he got really flustered and the things he was saying didn't really add up. But it's been 30-something years. If he's actually innocent, and like you said, you've had this cloud over you this whole time. Like we were talking about earlier, I can't remember what I said or did 10 minutes ago, let alone 30 years ago.
Exactly.
I'm not saying the guy's innocent. I don't know, but I think you can't put a lot of weight on things he says 30-something years later.
Exactly. I think a lot of people, from what I've read, they've kind of accepted that it's not going to be solved. They might think they know who did it, but it's not going to be solved because I think the police ballsed up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but that's what I've read, that they've admitted it themselves. I think the lead investigators at the time, they've admitted that they possibly could have did things right, even including the way they interviewed Michael. They just maybe pushed the wrong way. They just didn't gauge it right. And obviously the DNA, nothing's ever been found with this inconclusive DNA sample they had.
Yeah, I wonder too, because I think it's a pretty small town, right? It's outside of a fairly big city, but I just wonder how, not prepared, but like how
much experience they would have had of that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
how much like murder investigation experience they had. So it could have been botched. Not because they were, trying to botch it or just bad at their job. They just didn't have the experiences to know, because there had to have been DNA.
Of course.
There had to, with all of that, there had to have been something somewhere that was missed.
And if there's defensive ones, did you scratch?
Yeah.
What did they collect?
Right.
What did they not do?
Yeah.
But I think the fact that the lead detective, 3 of them were wanting to reinvestigate again on a voluntary basis, and it's haunted them. I don't believe for a second they would have done it deliberately. They've tried their best. It just wasn't good enough.
Yeah. And her poor family, her sister, I guess her sister was interviewed in that portion of the Cold Justice that I watched. And, she was hopeful at the beginning that, someone would find something that someone else missed. And I feel like they just keep getting disappointed. So it's a really sad case, because it sounds like she was a lovely woman and everyone was like, this unlikely for something like this to happen to her.
Exactly. I think what the problem is now is the fact that people that have gone to the same seminary have never heard about it. It's kept quiet. There's no plaque, there's no memorial.
Day of remembrance,
Nothing.
Scholarships,
And I know a lot of people have been critical of the seminary because of that. And they're saying, look, we've been as open as we can. We've been cooperative with the police, although the police officers have said they weren't as cooperative as they're saying. We've done everything we can. We're just keeping quiet because we're leaving it to the authorities to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, why are you not remembering her? It happened. You can't take away from that. That's, I think, what the problem is now.
That she's just been forgotten there.
Yeah.
I did find the seminary's student newspaper called The Bagpipe. And
no way, I love that.
Yeah. And one of the articles was saying just that. The woman writing it was like, it was 2 years into my schooling here when I found out that this murder had happened, and, devastated that there isn't anything for Elizabeth there. Like, sure, you don't want to get involved in, the investigation or whatever, but have something for her. She gave her heart and soul to that school while she was there, and have something for her.
Yeah, that's an odd thing that I couldn't get my head around. Why not? You can't just do nothing and pretend that we'll forget about it. So that was sad. That was even more sadder, that she's not had justice and she's not been remembered.
And there's so little about it online. Both of us struggled to find enough information on it. And I mean, luckily between the two of us, I think we did, but it was hard.
It was. You found a lot more than me. I couldn't believe it when I got your notes. I was like, oh, thank God for that.
Well, I think it's interesting because you probably got, the Scotland media side of it, which I think you got a lot more on like the investigation and stuff. And then most of what I got was from, it's like the Oxygen Network's website on the documentary. So that was more based on like the actual suspects. I think between the two ways our media reports things, we got
there.
A good amount. Yeah. Her parents did fly out and got her body, and she's buried in Scotland. Was it the Black Isle?
Black Isle, she is, yeah. She's buried up there with her dad. Her dad's up there at the same. Yeah. So sad.
Yeah, it is really sad.
But it was good collaborating with you on it, because if I had done that by myself, I wouldn't have found half of the stuff. So it was definitely worthwhile.
Yeah.
I am going to go back and listen to that podcast and see what else I can find, just because I'm nosy. I want to know what else they found, because there's so much.
Yeah.
The timeline's amazing. It's literally, step by step by step. It's really good. Really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I listened to like the first half of the first episode, but then I just got really busy at work and I just never went back to it. I want to find that episode of the Cold Justice too. It's got to exist somewhere.
It's got to.
I just couldn't find it.
I know, no, I couldn't either. The only thing is the seminary, they put out a post. Did you see that on their own website when they found out that the podcast was coming out last year? They preempted it and said, we've heard it's bad mouthing us and it's, saying that we should have done or stopping people talking. And that's when they said, we've done all we can, but we're just staying quiet for that reason. So it's like they just don't want anybody to talk about it.
They just want to sweep it under the rug, not think about it. Yeah.
But there you go. That's our story. Thank you for doing it with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun. It's fun doing something a little different than what I normally do podcasting,
Was it? What was it like? It's totally different. How did you find doing a true crime story?
It's fun because I love true crime. I'm not used to researching, so it was kind of a mess at first because I would just be scouring through these websites and I would like find a portion of text and I'd like copy it and paste it and just throw it into this like ongoing thing. And then I was like, I need to organize this somehow. So I was like kind of going through and trying to put it in order and organize it into something that made sense. It was fun. If I had more hours in my day, I would definitely like to do something like that a little more. But I enjoyed it.
It is good.
Yeah.
It's like a script you'd sent through, like I would write. And I thought, God, we can literally just read this out. It's perfect. It was so good.
Listening to Scottish murders, your stories and the way you tell them are so well put together and researched. I'm like, I can't show up with like just like these shitty like notes everywhere. So I sat down and I wrote them out so they sounded good. I had to be prepared.
Oh, it did sound good. You were more prepared than me. This is the one that I can't edit out. This is the one that nobody sees. Like, edit.
Oh, yeah. Even our podcast, there's so many things I have to edit out. Jay coughing or like sneezing,
burping, but you leave that in, don't you?
Sometimes I leave that in. He says like a lot, and I try to remove the likes and the ums, and I say a lot. He says like a lot. I try to make it sound like we're way more professional than we actually are.
I love your podcast right from the beginning. I've always said to you, because I was rubbish at the beginning, I was like, how do you get your audio so good? Because it's so clear, it's so crisp, it's so perfect. And I was like, how do you do it? And you're like, and you never told me. And I like have struggled on for months, years. Still don't know how you do it.
Because I don't understand any of this stuff at all. Like Jay, but even in the beginning, we were at our dining room table. It was like, I feel like it sounded pretty shitty because sometimes we'd get echoes. One day we would record and it would sound amazing. The next time we would record and it sounded like we were in a tin can. And like, I had no idea until finally I was like, we need to like move this into a smaller space, put up some soundproofing. So like you see, like this is actually a window behind me, but it's like full of soundproofing.
Really?
I've got a blanket hung on the wall across from me to like not have like.
I love it.
So
I love it.
I'm sorry I didn't answer you. I don't know if I had an answer because people are like, oh, what settings use what? I'm like, I don't know. I just plug this thing in and cross my fingers that it sounds okay.
So is that where you both record now in that little room? You both sit there? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you were at the table.
You could hear the little dogs walking around.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
So anyway, tell everybody how they can find you.
So we are on, I think, pretty much every podcast platform. You can just search Fuck My Work Life and it should pop up. And we're on all the socials at FMWL Pod.
Scottish Murders is a production of Clurin Ton.